let's talk about the events of the day. Okay, so our old mate Jim Chalmers, perfect example of dissent here. The greatest treasurer of all time, the man who, most likely, whenever Anthony Albanese decides to step off the throne, and again, given the size of the victory, that is probably the way that power will transfer. He'll end up being most likely the next Prime Minister. Why? Because we like the idea of the person who balances the books as being the next one in line. And we know that this bloke has got a pretty solid opinion of himself. Fine, fair enough. Not the first politician to have an ego. But he thinks he can remake capitalism. Why? Because he told us. And after the thumping victory that now presents virtually no resistance to the government doing what it wants to do, not just in the lower but in the upper house, they are now going to try to do a whole bunch of things that maybe they did not take to the election because somebody came up with the idea at a forum after the election and we didn't have an opportunity to take it to the people. But while we're here and we've got such a massive majority, guess what? We're going to do it anyway. Now, this Economic Reform Roundtable is a reheat of the Jobs Summit, which, remember, was a reheat of the 2020 summit when Rudd won in 2007. And part of the way this works is to make it look like we're not leading, we're not telling everyone what to do. We've gathered the greatest and smartest minds here to give us ideas. We put it all up on a whiteboard and then we sit back and look at it. But a few people are starting to notice that maybe it's not as an organic process as that. Maybe, just maybe, this is all a little bit of theatre to help justify doing what they've always wanted to do, but finding a different way to do it. We know in 2019, it was Bill Shorten who went to an election with aggressive positions on taxation, rolling back what he believed to be too generous issues when it came to taxation, and of course negative gearing. Well, we all know how that went. The bloke who'd already packed up and was ready to be Prime Minister because the media had told him so, we got a rude shock from the Australian people because they said, no, not on our watch. Well, Phil Cooley, writing in the Australian Financial Review today, is among many who are starting to notice that the Productivity Summit may well just be a way of reheating what was rejected in 2019. Now, remember, in 2019, negative gearing was on the table about getting rid of it for anything but somebody who was going to buy a new home into the future. If you had it, you'd hold it until the house that you currently had was sold, but it wouldn't be able to be handed down generation to generation or transferred between husband and wife upon death. This is what Jim Chalmers said in the past about the need to get rid of the negative gearing system as it works now.
Any housing policy that doesn't deal with negative gearing and capital gains tax is a sham. Housing affordability, which doesn't make important and considered changes to capital gains and negative gearing, has a hole in the middle of it. If you want to deal with housing affordability, you need to start with negative gearing and capital gains.
Which is why it is really interesting what the union movement is starting to say. Because the union movement got what it wanted out of the Jobs Summit, because it, of course, is 50% of the Labor Party. Every single MP in the parliament is a member of a union. Unions help set the policy platform at the state level. They help pick the candidates to run at state and federal levels. And of course, as we saw in the past with leadership changes of Rudd, Gillard, Rudd, they can be in charge of who runs the country. So let's pay attention to what unions want out of the very process that we are being told is just a giant open field where everything's on the table. Well, the unions are now pressuring the government to, among other things, increase taxes and cut back negative gearing. Put simply, let's go back to what was rejected in 2019. Here's the unions on the ABC yesterday.
So we're going to take a proposal that both negative gearing and capital gains tax should be reformed, that they should be limited to one investment property and grandfathered for the existing arrangements for 5 years to allow people to adjust. You can have as many investment properties as you want, but in terms of the tax benefit, limit that to one. The issue isn't, ordinary Australians that are trying to get ahead and have an investment property. That's not the issue. The issue is that a small number of investors, and we're talking about 1% of investors, own 25% of the investment properties.
And you can start to work out and thread together when the drums start beating in a certain direction. Now, there is something about the left in Australia that I must say I admire, which is that even when they lose elections, they find a way, when they get back into power, of somehow doing what they had always planned to do, no matter how many times it has been rejected. When it comes to the Conservative side of politics, of course, as soon as you lose an election, you must dump everything. Everything gone, don't stand by anything, reinvent yourself each and every time, because that's the way the game is enforced by, in part, the media. So I noticed today Patricia Karvelis, the host of Q&A, and of course a presenter on the ABC, a lady who, to be honest, I've always got along with. There's nothing personal about my criticism or observations here, but she wrote today on the taxpayer-funded website that perhaps one of the reasons why all of this is back on the agenda is because there are younger voters. The younger voters want this change because, of course, they are the ones most affected by the housing crisis, and by that, the assumption being, she didn't say it, but the imputation being, many of the people who may well have voted against it have either fallen off the twig or have changed their minds since 2019. And again, knowing that there is this process of pretending we're getting everyone to come to Canberra with all of the different ideas, and then they're going to go on a whiteboard and, oh, geez, I hadn't even thought of that. Let's do what was rejected in 2019. I didn't realise. What a good idea. Does everyone agree? Yes. Unions? Good. Jim Chalmers also, this past couple of days, has released the agenda for the upcoming Productivity Summit. And guess what is on day 3 in the last session? So the very end of the process, when maybe some people after lunch have buggered off and gone home, and maybe it's just the unions that'll be left, a better tax system. 2019, all over again, but with a different result. Perhaps that's what they're hoping for.